My name's Tom Harwood and join me 9:30 a.m. every weekday for The Briefing, your one-stop shop for everything you need to know about what's going on in politics today. I wonder if this is a deal that might need to be like the biscuits in this factory, twice baked. Is there not an opportunity here to win out against the extremes?
Tom Harwood, GBNews.
What are you going to do about it?
Things should have been done differently, and they certainly are being done differently.
Don't miss it. The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, 9:30 Monday to Friday on GB News.
Where would you like to go?
Just take me to the studio, please, mate. You know where you're going. I've got a show to do. Friday Night Feast on GB News, 7 p.m. And it's like nothing you've ever seen before. We take a different angle on the week's biggest news stories. The viewers and listeners set me some absolutely mad challenges to do. We tried to rehome a rescue dog. And yes, there's some other wacky stuff in there as well. I feel like I could take on the world. Well, that's that. Friday Night Feast with me, Patrick Christie's, every Friday, 7 till 9 p.m. on GB News. Be there.
And then there were two. Yes, hello and welcome. You're watching The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, and today we're exploring that leadership contest in depth. We'll be speaking to one of the senior supporters of Rishi Sunak, one of the senior supporters of Liz Truss, and investigating what they say with someone from the Taxpayers Alliance. All that to come after the headlines.
Good morning, it's 9:31. I'm Rhiannon Jones in the GB newsroom. Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss have begun their head-to-head battle to become the next Prime Minister. The former Chancellor and the current Foreign Secretary are the final two contenders after Penny Mordaunt was eliminated yesterday. More than 160,000 Conservative Party members will now decide who should take over from Boris Johnson. Ms Truss told GB News she'll correct mistakes of the past.
Need to cut taxes. We shouldn't have raised national insurance in the first place. We need to cut it now. We need a moratorium on the green energy levy to cut people's fuel bills. And we need to power recovery.
Soaring inflation has pushed the UK's budget deficit to its highest level since April last year. The Office for National Statistics says public sector borrowing rose to almost £23 billion. That's up from £12.5 billion in May. It's the second highest June borrowing since records began. The number of asylum seekers in UK hotels has trebled in a year. Home Office data shows there were over 26,000 migrants living in temporary accommodation at the end of last year. That's up from around 9,500 at the start of 2021. And Gatwick Airport has hired 400 new security staff to help ease queuing ahead of the school holidays. Bosses say they're doing everything they can to make the process as smooth as possible. It follows months of disruption and delays. Passengers will be shown how to separate liquids in hand luggage to try and reduce delays at security. TV online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Tom with The Briefing.
A very good morning to you. It's 9:34 and this is The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood, on your TV and your radio. Now, our national reporter Paul Hawkins has been exploring exactly the mechanics of the Tory leadership race. He's got this report.
The numbers of votes cast for each candidate is as follows. Mordaunt, 105. Sunak, 137. Truss, 113. Therefore, Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss will be the candidates going forward to a final ballot of Conservative Party members.
Liz Truss and Rishi Sunak will slug it out to be the next Conservative leader and your Prime Minister. It's the final round of voting and now it goes to the party members, not just the MPs. Over the next 6 weeks, interviews, several hustings and at least one televised debate. And before you think about becoming a member to get a vote, don't bother. You can only vote if you've been a member for 3 months. If that's you, then from August the 1st, you'll start to receive a ballot pack with instructions on how to vote, either by post or online. The recommended way, which also uses special codes to make sure the vote is secure. If you're on holiday, don't worry. The party says you can apply for an email to be sent to you with the codes so you can apply online. So how many Conservative members are there? Well, the official number isn't known, but at the last leadership election in 2019, there were around 160,000 members. Insiders say that number is likely to have grown a bit, but it'll still be less than 0.5% of the electorate deciding who the next PM is. They've got until 5 p.m. on Friday, the 2nd of September to vote. The winner, their party leader, and the UK's next Prime Minister will be announced on Monday, the 5th of September.
Sure to be an exciting summer ahead. Well, the race kicked off this morning officially with those final two. And this morning, the front-running candidate, Liz Truss, spoke to Eamon and Isabel on breakfast here on GB News.
What people right across Britain care about is how we are going to help them with the cost of living, how we're going to unleash opportunity. And I'm somebody who can get things done in government. I've shown that I'm willing to push things through Whitehall. And that's why we need to cut taxes. We shouldn't have raised national insurance in the first place. We need to cut it now. We need a moratorium on the green energy levy to cut people's fuel bills. And we need to power recovery by attracting investment, getting new businesses to set up. So if we carry on with our current economic policy that is currently projected to lead to a recession, that will not put us in a good place to win the election. I'm somebody who can get things done, get the economy growing, put us on a positive footing, but I can also relate to people right across the country. I grew up in Paisley and Leeds. I went to a comprehensive school. I understand the struggles people are facing now, and I'm the candidate who can really communicate how we are going to change things and turn things around in Britain.
Liz Truss there speaking earlier on GB News. Well, while the bookies and the polls suggest that Liz Truss is currently the favourite amongst the membership, it was the former Chancellor Rishi Sunak who won the most MP support, securing first place yesterday with just over 38% of the parliamentary party. Well, let's turn to a prominent supporter of his now, the former Environment Secretary, former Northern Ireland Secretary and, of course, leading Brexiteer, Theresa Villiers. Thanks for joining us, Theresa, this morning. I suppose the big question is now, how does Rishi Sunak make up his polling deficit with members?
By presenting his economic plan to tackle inflation, grow the economy and get taxes down. He is the right person to get us through what are going to be difficult and turbulent economic times with the global inflation crisis. I believe that he can convince the membership that he's the person who's most likely to be able to win us a general election.
It's going to be a bit of an uphill struggle. The Conservative Party has lost some credibility on the economy in recent years. Ipsos Mori, the pollsters, found that in March this year, the Labour Party overtook the Conservative Party for trust on tax. Is that the former Chancellor's fault?
I think the difficulties in the polls for the government over the past few months, I'm afraid, were associated with the traumatic events leading up to Boris Johnson's resignation. I mean, they've been damaging for all of us, for the Conservative government and Conservative MPs, and that will be a big task for the winner of this contest, to rebuild that trust. But Rishi Sunak has showed during the pandemic that he can act fast at a time of crisis. Within a matter of days from the seriousness of the COVID outbreak being obvious, money was arriving in people's bank accounts under the furlough scheme, saving 11 million jobs. So I think Rishi has shown that he has the competence and the experience to regain trust and confidence in the Conservative government.
I suppose some people might ask, how has Rishi Sunak in the last few months found £37 billion extra spending to alleviate cost of living pressures, no doubt welcome for many, many people? Why can he find £37 billion for extra spending, but finding no money at all for tax cuts?
He has reduced some taxes over recent months as part of our response to the inflation crisis. That includes a cut in fuel duty, which is the biggest for 20 years. It also includes raising the threshold at which people pay national insurance. So that's a cut in tax for millions of households. He is a tax-cutting conservative. He just believes that we need, first of all, to deal with inflation, to grow the economy, to give us the headroom to reduce taxes without having to increase borrowing to do it.
I suppose finally in this conversation there has been some blue on blue over the last 2 weeks or so. Is that going to increase now? How clean a campaign will we see across August?
I really hope that we don't see negative tactics. I know that Rishi wants to run a positive campaign about what he can do for the Conservative Party and for the country. So I would certainly appeal to everyone involved in this campaign to focus on the positives. We've got two very talented candidates. The membership can take a decision on which is best without the need for negative campaigning. Being positive is what we should be about in this contest, and I know Rishi shares that view.
Well, Theresa Villiers, thank you so much for joining us this morning from College Green there outside Parliament. Really appreciate your time on The Briefing. Well, there, Theresa Villiers, prominent supporter of Rishi Sunak. Well, as we briefly touched upon there in that conversation, the cost of living is an issue that has come to dominate this campaign. On the one side, Liz Truss says that tax is too high, and on the other, Rishi Sunak says that inflation must be dealt with before any tax cuts come. Well, let's turn now to someone who looks at tax and the cost of living for a living. It's Elliot Kegg, who's the investigations campaign manager, got there eventually, at the Taxpayers Alliance. Joins me in the studio. Elliot, thank you for being here today. I suppose the big question is, who's right? Tax cuts in and of themselves can often be inflationary.
I think Rishi Sunak is absolutely right to be concerned about the role that tax cuts may have in accelerating inflation. However, I think the problem with the rhetoric from people such as Rishi Sunak and others is that it places the emphasis on taxpayers and on the consumer to start cutting down on their spending, when actually what we need to see is we need to see government start to make the savings. If government makes savings, it can afford the tax cuts and then they won't be as inflationary. So I think the problem is the onus is on the wrong place at the moment.
It's interesting when we talk about making those savings in government, because very few politicians are willing to say this needs to be cut, this spending needs to be reduced. The opposition will jump upon any sort of suggestion. When Nadeem Zwahi ran his brief campaign for leadership, he suggested cutting the cost of running departments by 20%. And of course, the Labour Party then came out immediately to say he wants to cut the NHS. Can politicians realistically find these savings in this political climate?
Well, it's absolutely incredibly difficult. And we do need a politician to be brave. I mean, we've seen two leadership candidates propose creating two new government departments, one for digital, one for energy. Now, they may be worth doing, but that's just going to be another layer of bureaucracy. It's going to be another Whitehall department. And we've heard some good language, some good rhetoric from some candidates about the need to cut spending, the need for the state to do less, but we haven't heard many concrete details, and I think that's what we're going to be waiting for over the next few weeks.
Yes, it's interesting. We're hearing a lot about how taxes will be reduced, about how the economy may grow, but not so much about how the state would shrink. Are there specific proposals that the Taxpayers Alliance would like to see these candidates take on?
Well, we've looked at things such as regional pay bargaining, such as bringing public sector sick leave and annual leave into line with the private sector. We've looked at things such as scrapping some of these enormous pet projects such as HS2, and also just some of the day-to-day waste that we uncover every day. So there are a number of proposals we've put forward, but this is really, really critical now. We've seen the ONS publish data this morning that suggests that, well, that says that public sector interest repayments on our debt is now £19.1 billion for the month of June alone. Now, that's enough to easily pay for a 2p cut in income tax. It's enough to fund the Home Office for a year. It's really, really shocking figures and shows the need to bring the cost of government down.
Certainly a huge amount being spent on that debt interest, but also the Exchequer getting more money than it was expecting as well. The CEBR suggesting that there's £60 billion extra that the Treasury wasn't expecting because this inflation is pumping the Treasury full of cash as well as prices. What should be done with that £60 billion?
Well, if you've got fiscal headroom, then absolutely you should be using it to cut taxes. If you cut taxes, then in the long term you're going to get the economic growth that's going to help to bring that debt down. We've done some modelling that suggests that a national insurance cut, an income tax cut and a VAT cut would mean the economy would be tens of billions of pounds richer by 2029. So if there's a fiscal headroom there, and it does seem that there is, then any new Chancellor, any new Prime Minister should be looking at how to put that money back in people's pockets.
Well, Elliot Keck, thank you so much for that analysis there. Really, really interesting stuff, and no doubt something for the candidates to mull over in the weeks ahead. Well, let's now move on to the Foreign Secretary, Liz Truss. She, of course, rose her support from starting off at 50 supporters in the MP ballot in round one, up to 64, then up to 71, further to 86, and finished off with 113 votes, up 27 from the round before, securing a place in the final, of course. Let's cross to one of her supporters. David Jones is the former Secretary of State for Wales and now Deputy Chairman at the European Research Group. Thank you so much for joining us, David Jones. I suppose, first of all, what made you, as Deputy Chairman of the European Research Group and a prominent Brexiteer, back Liz Truss, who voted Remain?
Well, initially, as you may know, I actually supported Suella Braverman, who was eliminated some time ago. But I've worked with Liz Truss over the past few months, and I've been very impressed by her grasp of, for example, the Northern Ireland Protocol issue, which is complicated and which she took over, frankly, at the drop of a hat after David Frost resigned. And the way that she gripped that issue and, in fact, took it through to the Northern Ireland Protocol Bill, which completed its passage through the Commons yesterday, has convinced me that she is the right person to lead this country. Coupled with that, of course, her performance over the important issue of Ukraine, where she's been, with Boris Johnson, one of the leading Western actors in the whole issue.
It's interesting to see the right of the party coalesce around Liz Truss. Certainly someone who, since becoming a Member of Parliament in 2010, has been on the sort of free enterprise side of the party. But there are some issues with regard to her past. She was, of course, formerly a member of the Liberal Democrats when she was a student. She once proposed the abolition of the monarchy, albeit still when she was a student as well. Are these not lines that we're going to hear from the Rishi Sunak campaign time and time again?
Well, that may well be the case, but I've no doubt that Liz will be campaigning on positive issues. But, you know, the whole point of politics is, by argument, to get people to change their mind and to come over to your point of view. And it's quite clear that Liz has been thinking very deeply about her political position over the years, and I've no doubt at all that she is committed to the cause of Brexit, that she is a free marketeer, and that she believes in liberating this country from the European Union. And that's why I and many of my colleagues are supporting her.
Yes, it is interesting to see particularly the words from the Brexit Opportunities Secretary, Jacob Rees-Mogg, about her desire to get rid of that EU regulation. I suppose one of the big questions is, Liz Truss secured around a third of support from MPs. She's clearly a lot more popular with party members than she is with MPs. Just how difficult would party management become if Liz Truss becomes Prime Minister and wants to deliver this Thatcherite agenda of tax cuts, of deregulation? Will her MPs be on side?
Well, you're right. This has been the tightest leadership contest in the Commons that I can remember, and I've been here for over 17 years. But having said that, my experience is that once the new leader is put in place, all MPs, including those who oppose him or her in the run-up to the leadership election, do coalesce behind the leader. And I think that you'll see that happening this time. I've no doubt that everybody will want Liz to succeed, most obviously because we want to win the next general election. And a party that's divided, it finds it hard to win elections.
Well, David Jones, thank you so much for talking us through those issues there. It will be a fascinating debate, I suppose, over the next month or so, and we'd love to have you back at some point in the future. Thank you for joining us. Well, let's now move on to what happened yesterday afternoon. Of course, once those votes were in, Parliament was abuzz. The parliamentary stage of this election had concluded, and the public, albeit quite a small proportion of the public, stage of this election began. Well, yesterday afternoon I caught up with one of Liz Truss's backers, prominent backers, Deanna Davison, the MP for Bishop Auckland.
MPs, how does the campaign now change as it turns out to the country?
Well, yeah, strange to believe, Tom, but a lot of our members have very similar views to the MPs that they actually elect. So, we're going to be talking about the economy. That's something that's very much on people's minds given the cost of living.
That Deanna Davison has dropped out there. Well, we'll try and get that back a little bit later. But do you know what? I also caught up with a number of backers of other people during yesterday afternoon in central lobby of Parliament. So one of those people that I caught up with was Simon Hart, the former Welsh Secretary and indeed backer of Rishi Sunak.
I think people will remember Rishi for the extraordinary work that he did in the Treasury during the pandemic. Barely a family or a household or a business in the UK didn't feel some of the things that he was able to do as Chancellor, whether that was furlough, whether that was a business interruption loan which saved your business from going bust during the pandemic. That was all down to Rishi. So whilst you may be right in one respect, I think he has a very, very strong brand as somebody who can move mountains really quite quickly and get things done and do them for the right reasons. So I'm hoping that's going to come through again as we go into the next phase. But it will be tough, and so it should be.
Conservative members aren't warming to Rishi Sunak at anywhere like the speed that he needs if he wants to win. Conservative members might be thinking more about tax and spend than potentially how slick a campaign is being run. How does he address that issue in a way that is engaging with Conservative members?
I hope an efficient campaign, which is how I would view it, is a really good way of being able to get across the arguments that you want to make. And I think Rishi's position right from the start has always been, look, I will be a responsible Prime Minister. I'm not going to make promises that we can't keep, however tempting it might be, however populist it might seem. Of course I'm a low tax person. Everybody in the party wants to reduce taxes. We all do. But it would be folly to do so in a way which puts the rest of the economy in jeopardy. And he will make a very strong pitch, what he already has, and won over the hearts and minds of his colleagues here, that actually being responsible with the economy is something which our members across the country, whether in Wales or anywhere else, will take incredibly seriously. So again, it's tempting to do some make some populist gestures. Actually, I don't think he'll be tempted into that. He's a serious guy, and we need a serious guy at the moment.
Well, there we have. We've had a backer of Liz Truss, a backer of Rishi Sunak as well. But there was someone else in the contest yesterday, of course. The person who came third and therefore didn't make it through to the final round was, of course, Penny Mordaunt. Well, I caught up with one of Penny's backers, David Davis, who's, of course, that prominent Brexiteer, former Brexit secretary, and he was, of course, on the membership ballot to become leader back in 2005.
David Davis, you have been a prominent supporter of Penny Mordaunt, who came so close to making it through. You must be disappointed.
Yes, of course I am. I mean, she fought a very brave campaign. I was clear in my mind she was the best candidate. I still think she is, but the party decided differently. And that's how these things work. I think she did a really good job, not just of being brave and thoughtful and creative. She was also very constructive in the campaign. So I do hope that whoever forms the next cabinet will keep that in mind when they do.
Do you have any words to say about the allegations of the sort of backroom campaigns, the dark arts that may have been going on across the campaigns? Did that sort of briefing hurt Penny Mordaunt?
Well, today's not the day to go into that. You know, there's an outcome now. It's done. The job for the Tory party is to try and pull itself back together. I mean, a number of my colleagues have been unhappy in the last few days about people knocking licks out of each other. And also, I think the two campaigns going forward will have to remember that the party in the country, if anything, is even less tolerant of unfettered attacks on each other than the party in the House is. And so if either of them just set about the other side, they'll lose votes, they won't gain them. What they're going to have to do is to decide on what the alternative economic strategies are. The big difference between the two candidates is the economic strategies. And that will be very, very different. You've got Rishi, as steady as you go sort of candidate, with lots of argument that perhaps that hasn't given the best outcome so far. And on the other hand, you've got Liz with a very, very radical tax cutting strategy. Remember, I'm a tax cutter. I'm probably Mr. Tax Cutter in the Tory party, but I think there are arguments to say, well, is that too far or is it not? Those are going to be the things that are going to be debated in the hustings in the next few weeks.
David Davis there. Now, of course, he mentions those hustings over the next few weeks, and indeed, there are not one, not two, not three, but 12 sets of hustings that these two poor candidates will have to go through, one in every region of the United Kingdom, starting a week today. Next Thursday is the first hustings, and they go through right to the end of August. But it's not just those Tory hustings that, of course, the party organises. There'll also be some debates. And the first debate that has been officially confirmed begins on Monday evening on the BBC. So we'll look forward to that and indeed the race to come. But that's it from me today. You've been watching The Briefing with me, Tom Harwood. I'm back tomorrow morning at 9:30. But next, it's To The Point with Mercy Maroki. But first, here's the weather.
Good morning. Alex Deacon here with your latest weather update from the Met Office. Today, after all the drama of the thunderstorms and the heat, things are much closer to average. Quite a lot of cloud around. Temperatures about the average for this time of year and not much rain around either. We're kind of between weather systems. The heat has been pulled away to the east, which is why it's much more comfortable out there this morning. Quite cloudy out there this morning as well, but most places having a dry start to the day. Sunny spells across Wales, southwest England, a good part of Scotland, and for most it's going to be a dry and a bright day. The cloud will come and go. Just a chance of one or two showers over parts of the Midlands, and particularly later on over parts of northwest England, maybe southwest Scotland, but as I said, most places are going to be dry. With a breeze coming in from the North Sea, some of the east coast will be a little cool. Temperatures generally close to those average values for this time of the year. High teens, low 20s across the north, maybe mid-20s further south.